At 82, Martin Scorsese names his 10 favorite movies. Martin Scorsese, born November 17, 1942, in Queens, New York, is one of the most influential filmmakers in cinema history. Raised in a devout Italian-American family, he overcame childhood asthma through his passion for movies. Graduating from NYU's Tisch School of the Arts, Scorsese made his mark with gritty, character-driven films like Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, and Goodfellas, known for his dynamic storytelling, innovative camera work, and deep explorations of morality. He has won numerous awards, including an Oscar for The Departed. His work continues to shape and inspire generations of filmmakers worldwide. Scorsese's selections aren't mere compliments. They're deeply personal films that stop him, make him rewind, and carry them into everything he ever directed. Scorsese's bond with On the Waterfront. Coming off a lifetime of cinematic influences, Martin Scorsese often cites On the Waterfront, 1954, as one of the most pivotal works in shaping his artistic voice. For Scorsese, it was not simply a film, it was a revelation. The raw, transformative performance of Marlon Brando as Terry Malloy struck him deeply, showing a level of emotional truth and vulnerability he had never seen before. Brando's portrayal of a morally conflicted man, torn between loyalty and justice, mirrored many of the moral and spiritual struggles that would later permeate Scorsese's own films. Raised in a devout Italian-American Catholic environment, Scorsese recognized in On the Waterfront a profound sense of guilt, redemption, and moral consequence. The film's Catholic undertones, the weight of sin, the possibility of salvation, and the moral cost of inaction resonated with his upbringing and shaped the thematic backbone of his work. The ethical complexity of the story, where right and wrong blur into shades of gray, mirrored the nuanced moral landscapes Scorsese would later explore in films like Mean Streets and The Irishman. It wasn't just the story, it was the way the story was told. The gritty realism of Elia Kazan's direction, combined with Bud Schulberg's authentic dialogue, gave Scorsese a blueprint for grounding drama in the real world while still pursuing cinematic artistry. Brando's famous "I Could Have Been a Contender" scene was more than an acting masterclass. It was a spiritual jolt for a young Scorsese, demonstrating how a single performance could define the emotional weight of an entire film. For Scorsese, On the Waterfront remains a touchstone, a reminder that cinema has the power to challenge the audience's conscience while captivating their emotions. It was the film that showed him the intersection between storytelling, morality, and human vulnerability, a combination that would define his career. Why the River stays with Scorsese after the emotional awakening sparked by On the Waterfront. Martin Scorsese's cinematic journey took another profound turn when he discovered Jean Renoir's The River, 1951. Unlike the gritty moral conflicts of American cinema, The River offered something entirely different, a meditative, almost poetic immersion into life along the banks of the Ganges River in colonial India. For Scorsese, it wasn't just the story that mattered, it was the sensation the film created. The River taught Scorsese that cinema could be more than an act of presenting emotion. It could be emotion. Renoir's use of color, light, and composition didn't just illustrate the world, it evoked it. Every frame seemed to breathe, carrying with it the sounds of water, the warmth of the Indian sun, and the rhythm of daily life. Scorsese realized that a film could function like a piece of music or a painting, something felt in the heart before it is understood in the mind. This revelation expanded his understanding of filmmaking. Instead of merely using plot and dialogue to drive engagement, The River demonstrated the power of visual poetry. It showed him how mood, pacing, and atmosphere could tell a story as effectively as words. The film's gentle contemplation of love, loss, and the passage of time resonated deeply with Scorsese's own belief that cinema should not only inform, but transform its audience. Renoir's approach, patient, observational, and filled with empathy, left a permanent imprint on Scorsese's directorial philosophy. He would later carry these lessons into his own work, infusing even his most intense narratives with moments of quiet reflection and visual beauty. For Scorsese, The River remains a masterclass in how cinema can touch the soul without ever raising its voice. Paisà's influence on Scorsese. Following the meditative beauty of The River, Martin Scorsese's cinematic education took a stark turn when he encountered Roberto Rossellini's Paisà, 1946, a cornerstone of Italian neo-realism. Unlike the polished narratives of Hollywood, Paisà was rough, fragmented, and unapologetically real, comprising 6 loosely connected episodes set in post-war Italy. The film depicted the chaos, desperation, and fleeting humanity of a country emerging from devastation. For Scorsese, Paisà was not simply a movie. It was a revelation about truth in storytelling. Rossellini's decision to use non-professional actors, natural locations, and unvarnished dialogue stripped away the artifice of traditional cinema. What remained was raw, unfiltered humanity. The imperfections became the beauty, the awkward silences, the incomplete conversations, and the small acts of kindness felt more authentic than any scripted drama. This approach left a permanent mark on Scorsese's own filmmaking philosophy. He saw that characters did not need to be flawless or neatly resolved to be compelling. In Paisà, people were contradictory, capable of courage and cruelty, hope and despair, often within the same moment. This moral and emotional complexity resonated with Scorsese's Catholic upbringing, where human weakness was intertwined with the potential for grace. The episodic structure also appealed to him. Each chapter in Paisà offered a self-contained story. Yet together, they painted a larger mosaic of a wounded nation. This mosaic-like storytelling would echo in Scorsese's later work, where side characters, subplots, and fleeting encounters enrich the tapestry of the main narrative. Perhaps most importantly, Paisà reaffirmed for Scorsese that cinema could serve as a historical witness. By refusing to romanticize or sanitize post-war Italy, Rossellini created a time capsule of human resilience and fragility. For Scorsese, this was the essence of filmmaking, not to comfort, but to confront, to preserve the truth before it fades. Paisà didn't just influence his style. It solidified his belief that the heart of cinema lies in embracing life's rough edges. Ashes and diamonds shaping Scorsese. After the raw realism of Paisà, Martin Scorsese found himself deeply moved by the haunting elegance of Andrzej Wajda's Ashes and Diamonds, 1958. This Polish masterpiece is a quiet yet devastating war tragedy, set during the final hours of World War II, where victory does not bring peace, but instead moral uncertainty and personal ruin. For Scorsese, it wasn't just the plot that resonated, it was the way Wajda fused poetic imagery with the suffocating inevitability of fate. The protagonist, Mikaik, is a resistance fighter tasked with assassinating a political opponent, yet over the course of one night, he experiences love, longing, and fleeting hope. Wajda frames these moments in striking, symbolic imagery: white sheets fluttering like ghosts, glasses of flaming liquor, and fireworks bursting in a sky that feels more mournful than celebratory. For Scorsese, these visuals weren't just beautiful. They carried an emotional weight that transcended dialogue, showing how cinema could speak through images as powerfully as words. What struck Scorsese most was the film's moral complexity. Macek is both a hero and a doomed man, caught in a world where ideals are compromised and violence erases personal redemption. The ending, Macek's senseless death in a trash-strewn field, left Scorsese shaken. It was an anticlimax that refused to offer closure, a reminder that real-life tragedies often end without justice or recognition. This shaped Scorsese's own cinematic voice, influencing his portrayals of characters trapped in cycles of guilt, moral collapse, and silent suffering, like Ashes and Diamonds. Many of Scorsese's films, Taxi Driver, The Irishman, Raging Bull, confront the emptiness that follows violence, replacing heroic triumph with lingering sorrow. For Scorsese, Wajda's masterpiece was a revelation that war stories need not be about battles and victories. They could be about the invisible wreckage left in the human soul. Ashes and Diamonds taught him that sometimes the most powerful tragedies are the ones whispered, not shouted. The Red Shoes shaping Scorsese. After the haunting moral collapse of Ashes and Diamonds, Martin Scorsese encountered another cinematic revelation, Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger's The Red Shoes, 1948. This Technicolor ballet fantasy was unlike anything he had ever seen. Its dazzling visual palette, dreamlike staging, and emotionally charged storytelling seeped into his creative DNA. For Scorsese, The Red Shoes was not just about dance. It was about the intoxicating pull of art and the steep price it demands. The film tells the story of Victoria Page, a gifted ballerina torn between her passion for dance and her love for a composer. The central ballet sequence, an extended, surreal performance where reality melts into fantasy, left Scorsese stunned. He saw in it a complete fusion of cinema and art, where color, movement, and music became as essential to storytelling as dialogue. The saturated reds, lush blues, and golden light weren't just decoration. They carried emotional weight, illustrating the seductive and destructive nature of obsession. Scorsese found resonance in the artistic conflict of The Red Shoes, reflecting themes of sacrifice, beauty, and personal destruction that shaped his own filmmaking style. Fellini's Dreamscape freed Scorsese after the visual splendor and artistic obsession of The Red Shoes. Martin Scorsese encountered Federico Fellini's 812, 1963, a surrealist masterpiece that would alter his understanding of cinema's possibilities. The film follows Guido Anselmi, a celebrated director suffering from creative block, who drifts between reality, memory, and dream. For Scorsese, 812 was not merely a film, it was a reflection of the chaos, contradictions, and inner conflicts of an artist's mind, something he intimately recognized in himself. What struck Scorsese was Fellini's fearless embrace of narrative fragmentation. 812 doesn't move in a straight line. Instead, it flows like consciousness itself, jumping from past to present, fantasy to fact, without warning. This structure gave Scorsese something he calls permission, the freedom to tell deeply personal, subjective stories without being bound by conventional plot mechanics. He saw in Fellini's work an open invitation to make films that felt like dreams, where logic was emotional rather than chronological. Scorsese related to 812's themes of creativity, vulnerability, and life's chaos, appreciating its blend of realism and fantasy, reflecting his own struggles. Ugetsu's influence on Scorsese. After the surreal liberation he found in 812, Martin Scorsese was deeply moved by Kenji Mizoguchi's Ugetsu, 1953, a film he often calls one of the most beautiful ghost stories ever made. Unlike typical supernatural tales, Ugetsu treats the ghostly not as horror, but as memory, lingering presences of the past that shape the living. This poetic approach resonated strongly with Scorsese, whose own films often explore the weight of history and the persistence of regret. Set during Japan's civil wars of the 16th century, Ugetsu follows two men whose ambitions lead them away from their families and into a realm where the line between life and death blurs. For Scorsese, the film's genius lies in how Mizoguchi uses the supernatural not for shock, but to reveal the tragic consequences of human desires. The ghosts are not monsters. They are reminders of what has been lost, of the choices that cannot be undone. Visually, Ugetsu had a profound impact on Scorsese's sensibilities. Mizoguchi's long, fluid takes and restrained compositions create a lyrical, almost meditative rhythm. Scenes drift like mist over water, evoking a sense of inevitability and melancholy. Scorsese saw in this style a masterclass in cinematic restraint, showing that a story's emotional power can come from what is left unsaid, from the quiet spaces between actions. Scorsese's silence reflects Ugetsu's themes of faith, mortality, connection, and the nature of horror. Scorsese, on L'Avventura's silent power, following the lyrical meditation of Ugetsu, Martin Scorsese found himself equally captivated by Michelangelo Antonioni's L'Avventura, 1960, a film that defied traditional storytelling by leaving its central mystery unresolved. The disappearance of Anna is never explained, and for Scorsese, this absence of resolution was a revelation. It showed him that cinema did not need to offer all the answers. Instead, it could invite audiences to dwell in uncertainty, in the emotional and psychological spaces that linger long after the credits roll. What struck Scorsese most was Antonioni's use of silence and emptiness as artistic tools. The long, languid shots of barren landscapes and disconnected characters created a sense of alienation that felt deeply human. This was not the emptiness of laziness, but the deliberate emptiness of life itself, where meaning is often elusive, and relationships drift like ships in fog. For Scorsese, L'Avventura became a lesson in trusting the audience's intelligence and emotional intuition. It affirmed that a film's strength can lie not in its answers, but in its questions. This philosophy would later echo in Scorsese's own work, where ambiguity, moral uncertainty, and open-ended narratives invite reflection rather than closure. Godard's Contempt through Scorsese. After discovering the unsettling power of L'Avventura, Martin Scorsese found himself equally fascinated and slightly intimidated by Jean-Luc Godard's Contempt, 1963. The film, with its lush cinemascope visuals and haunting Georges Delerue score, is at once a meditation on the breakdown of a marriage and a piercing commentary on the compromises of art. For Scorsese, Contempt was both beautiful and brutal, a cinematic mirror reflecting what we destroy in the name of art. What drew Scorsese most was Godard's modernist approach, fragmented narrative, self-reflexive style, and the collision between high art and commercial demands. The way Contempt moved between intimate emotional decay and meta-commentary on filmmaking deeply resonated with him. It showed that a film could operate on multiple levels, personal and political, emotional and intellectual, without losing its poetic core. Scorsese also recognized in Contempt a warning. The tensions between artistic integrity and industry pressures were all too familiar. And Godard's fearless portrayal of this conflict helped shape Scorsese's own negotiation between personal vision and studio demands. Ultimately, Contempt reaffirmed for him that modern cinema could be as much about the making of art as the art itself. 2001, when cinema became universe, after the intellectual provocation of Contempt, Martin Scorsese found an entirely different kind of revelation in Stanley Kubrick's 2001, A Space Odyssey, 1968. For Scorsese, Kubrick's masterpiece didn't just change cinema, it became cinema. Its meticulous precision, hypnotic pacing, and vast, deliberate silences redefined the boundaries of what a film could be. What struck Scorsese most was the way 2001 used time itself as a tool, stretching moments into meditations and allowing the audience to feel the weight of existence. The geometry of its compositions and the emotional resonance of its imagery, whether the bone tossed into the sky or the silent drift of spacecraft, were as carefully crafted as a symphony. Kubrick's marriage of technical innovation and profound philosophical inquiry showed Scorsese that cinema could be both a scientific instrument and a spiritual journey. In 2001, Scorsese saw a roadmap for the kind of immersive, transformative experiences he wanted to create, films that didn't simply tell a story, but expanded the viewer's sense of time, space, and humanity itself. Martin Scorsese's enduring legacy, building on the cinematic revelations that shaped his vision. Martin Scorsese has left a legacy that transcends mere filmography. His works, ranging from gritty urban dramas to deeply personal epics, have redefined storytelling, merging raw realism with spiritual and moral complexity. Beyond directing, he has championed film preservation, ensuring the survival of cinema's heritage for future generations. Scorsese's influence is evident in countless filmmakers who cite him as an inspiration. His legacy is not just in the films he made, but in the passion for cinema he ignited around the world. Lessons from Martin Scorsese's journey. Following the legacy he built. Martin Scorsese's life and career teach us that true artistry requires both courage and conviction. He shows that embracing personal vision, no matter how unconventional, can redefine an art form. His persistence in preserving cinema reminds us that passion must be matched with action. Most importantly, Scorsese's journey proves that failure, doubt, and obstacles are part of the creative process, not the end of it. His story encourages us to protect what we love, pursue our vision fearlessly, and never compromise on authenticity.